What else? What else happened this week? What else happened? Trump has been tweeting again, but I don't want to talk about that. He also said something like, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. What an asshole. But again, I don't want to talk about that. Don't make me talk about that. You know why? Because I am a European. I was born in Italy, raised in Ireland, and basically travel all over the European continent all the time. Except for now, obviously. So I wanted to highlight something that has been happening for a while, but is hardly discussed because everyone, I guess, is too busy talking about Donald Trump or Boris Johnson to help spread the word about the positive things that are happening in this world of ours, especially as far as the reevaluation of history is concerned. So I have to apologize in advance. I may get some things wrong because what I'm about to talk about is a little delicate, and I'm sure that there are people out there who know about this far more than I do. I'm not an expert. I'm interested in history and I've read something about it, but I cannot call myself an expert on what I'm about to say. I just had to say that before I start because, But a group of community activists in Leiden in the Netherlands has for a while been reassigning streets that were once named after important Boers. Basically, the Boers were mostly Dutch colonialists who settled into the Eastern Cape frontier in southern Africa during the 18th and much of the 19th century. But what is colonialism? Well... don't make me do this definition thing, but I'm gonna give it a shot. The way I understand it is that, quite simply, it's the practice of acquiring full or partial political control over another country, occupying it with settlers and exploiting it economically. In the process, colonizers usually imposed their religious and cultural practices on indigenous people. Obviously, this practice occurred in the African and Asian territory a great deal, not to mention that this is how Australia, Canada, and the United States were essentially born. I mean, they are prime examples of settler colonial societies. But the type of colonialism that took place in much of the African territory was of an exploitative type and is associated with slave trade. Slaves were often imported to the Americas by the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Dutch, the French, and the British. Now, because the territory around the country that is now known as South Africa was particularly good in terms of resources, it was particularly appetizing for settlers, and this eventually led to wars that are known as the Boer Wars, where the British Empire battled other European settlers, the large majority of whom came from the Netherlands. And this was a bit weird, as it was essentially a war whereby colonizers battled other colonizers, with the indigenous population still exploited within battle, or simply watching as these Europeans mucked about on their own home grounds. Furthermore, a big part of what stirred the war was that the British wanted to ban slavery while the Boers did not. And of course, diamonds were involved in the whole deal. And you can imagine why then that would have been a further motivation for it. Now, a passionate group of activists in the Netherlands has been reassigning the names of streets in Leiden that had been named after key figures of these wars and notable Boers. Unfortunately, I have tried to find out more about other examples of this happening, but the internet is not exactly going crazy over it. And I was also unable to find any articles about it. In fact, the way I found out about it was via a press release that was sent me on my Jazz's email address from a jazz publicist, and the email was titled Dutch Street Named After Rosetta Reitz. And I didn't even know who Rosetta Reitz was or what this whole thing was all about. But I found out. So this particular street had been once named for a leader in the Boer War named Francis W. Reitz, but is now named Reitstraat after Rosetta Reitz, who was a jazz historian, author, and record producer. Quite a remarkable figure, actually, as she founded Rosetta Records in 1980, where she retrieved lost women's blues and jazz in lavishly illustrated double albums with photos of the women, accompanied by liner notes by Reitz herself that provided plenty of historical context, which presented a new view from a woman's perspective. Have you ever heard of Ida Cox, Viola McCoy, Rosa Anderson, Martha Copeland, Mary Dixon, Bessie Brown, Rosetta Howard, and so on? If you haven't, there's no shame in that. But if you would like to know more about these amazing, somewhat forgotten lazy of early blues and jazz, go to rosettatribute.weebly.com. That's a tribute website in honor of the work done by Rosetta Reitz, and we largely have her to thank for the fact that many of these recordings have survived to this day. So let's take advantage of them. I'll do my bit here by playing you a song by Clio Brown, who, get this, was the first woman instrumentalist to receive the NEA Jazz Masters Fellowship, and certainly deserves more praise than she currently does. I mean, I think that I do feel like she has been forgotten somewhat. And this is an awesome tune from 1935, lamenting black representation in Hollywood and forgetting about what the term means in Ireland. This song is titled When Hollywood Goes Black and Tan.